Hey everybody, it's Mick Liubinskas here, and as a part of our new podcast series, we're interviewing leaders in sustainability across Australia and across the world to talk about solutions, how they're being implemented, what are the challenges, and how we overcome them. And today I'm speaking to Tam from Xero. Hey Tam, how you going?
I'm well, thanks, Mick. It's good to be here.
Yeah, can you tell me a bit about yourself, about your role, and what does Xero do?
Right, okay. Maybe we start with what Xero does for people who are not familiar with it. We don't make photocopiers, which is what people sometimes think.
Xero, not Xerox. Got it.
That's
Yeah, yeah,
right,
good
yeah.
stuff.
So we're a company that's been around for 19 years. We were founded in Wellington, New Zealand. We make software to make life better for small businesses and the people who advise them. So predominantly accountants and bookkeepers. And, we're a cloud-based solution that allows people to do all kinds of things, the critical jobs they need to do, manage their accounts, make payments, administer payroll, all that kind of thing. We I kind of wear two hats as a result of that. So I lead Xero's sustainability and impact function. And so I have a team of five excellent, hardworking people, three of whom work on sustainability and two work on social impact. And on the sustainability side, we do all the things that you would expect that a corporate sustainability team does. We manage disclosures and targets and reporting and strategies around, how do we transform the business and how do we pursue decarbonisation as an objective, and also managing things like modern slavery. But we also, which is a little bit unusual for someone in my kind of role, we also spend a lot of time thinking about how can we help small businesses to become more sustainable. We have over 4.5 million customers globally. That's a lot of small businesses. We can have much more impact as a business by enabling sustainability solutions for our customers than we can have for, with what we do ourselves. So I have, a whole lot of work going on around, how do we help small businesses get into that conversation? What tools can we provide for them? What resources? And, how do we enable their advisors, so accountants and bookkeepers, to also be part of helping them on that journey? And then the other part of my team manages our social impact work, which is predominantly at the moment around financial literacy for small businesses.
Wow, that's a lot. And I think I should have started up front, full disclosure, and I don't want this to appear completely biased, but I am two of those customers. Have been a happy customer of Xero for a long time, but I always like using the products for the people. As part of my research, I've been using Xero for 6 or 7 years. So excellent. Let me dig in on that part around the SMBs because obviously can you tell us about that? And also for those, obviously we've got a really range of listeners in terms of their understanding of sustainability. Scope three would have you think about your suppliers and customers and how their emissions, but you're taking a very proactive approach in what's your opportunity to educate and have sustainability impact on them. But can you for those who don't know, can you tell us about scope three and tell us like did it start from the thoughts around scope three, or is it something about the values that made you want to actually help all your customers?
Yeah, look, it's a bit of both. It's overall, it's about where can we have the most impact, right? So, I think pretty much everyone who works in this field does it because they want to have an impact, they want to drive change. Our carbon footprint is really small compared to most corporates. It's 99% scope three. So that's
Okay.
emissions from our value chain rather than
Yeah.
emissions that we directly control. We have no physical assets, we have no properties, we outsource all our data hosting. We've got, I think, something like 12 fleet vehicles in the world for a few locations. And scope two, we have, probably about half our properties we control the energy supply, and the other half we don't. So, we're at the mercy of landlords and building supervisors, and then everything else is the rest of our emissions. And so, we started thinking about the fact that we were seeing a lot of requests coming through for businesses to quantify their carbon emissions. So to think about, what are the emissions associated with a particular business activity? And we've seen historically with the modern slavery legislation in Australia and the UK, where we're also subject to that legislation, that that responsibility of managing that risk tends to get pushed down the supply chain. So it ends up being up to you if you're supplying a large corporate to demonstrate that you've got that risk managed and under control. And so we then started to think about the fact that, we've got lots of customers who supply to large corporates. And as climate disclosures became mandatory in New Zealand, now Australia, Singapore, we were concerned that we would see our customers end up being locked out of corporate supply chains, government contracts, and providing services to large events if there's a requirement to provide a carbon footprint, a decarbonisation plan, a carbon reduction action plan. And so how could we help them get on the front foot? Because the other thing we know about small businesses is that they're incredibly busy. I mean, my partner runs a small business, works like 60, 70 hours a week. And we know that people spend all day working in the business. And then at about 9 o'clock at night, they start thinking about working on the business. And that sustainability is probably just another compliance layer that for many of them, they're just like, I just don't have time to deal with this. We did a lot of research about, how do small businesses want to receive information? How do they learn new things? How do they tackle these challenges? And we found that the most important thing is to meet people where they already are. There's no point setting up a half-hour webinar for them to come to. They don't have time to do that. They need information they can digest on demand when it suits them. They need solutions to be affordable, simple, and using the tools that they're already using. So then we started thinking about the fact that, Xero holds general ledgers of, millions and millions of small businesses. How do we help them turn that into a carbon footprint? So we had, a number of different apps that were plugged into our ecosystem that we were working with. And then we formed a partnership with a fantastic Aussie startup called Someday that came out of Tasmania. And at the moment, all Xero users, regardless of their size, get 12 months access to Someday for free, including their educational resources, the Someday Academy, and the AI tools that help them to do a carbon footprint pretty quickly. They've also built a kind of quick estimate tool. So literally, if you've got your Xero data that they can import directly and your electricity bill and fuel bills, which you've probably recorded in Xero anyway, in about 10 minutes, Someday can give you a pretty accurate carbon footprint estimate. And then, for those who want to do something more sophisticated, it allows the layering of what we call activity-based data, which is, the data that actually relates to doing the thing, and also bespoke emissions factors. So that's, for example, the actual emissions associated with using a product rather than just an estimate. Or an intensity measure, which is, for example, for your business, Mick, what is the tons of CO2 equivalent that you produce per dollar of revenue? You're interested in this space. It's potentially a lot lower than some other consultants. So it's in your interest to be communicating that number and saying to people, my emissions factor for the work I do for you is, say 0.1, whereas other consultants, it might be 0.3 or 0.4 because they're not using renewable energy or they don't drive an EV or all of those things play into it. So we have this partnership with Someday, which, we've seen huge uptake of the product since we put that partnership in place. And, it's not too late for people who are potentially hearing this for the first time. They have 12 months, a full 12-month subscription for free from any subscription that's taken up by the 31st of March next year. So they'll still get another full year. And, alongside that, we're working with our accountant and bookkeeper network. Xero has maybe 60,000 accountants and bookkeepers around the world that work with us to help them understand that they need to help their clients get ready for this. They need to upskill in carbon accounting. We don't have enough people who can provide this service in Australia and New Zealand. And, a number of corporates are also going to require assurance over that data if that's the use case. And, it was interesting. I was at a seminar earlier this year where someone from Treasury said, but small businesses are not captured by the legislation. And I'm like, but they're in the supply chains of people who are. What makes you think that they're not captured? And then they said, you can just do it on a best endeavours basis. And we said to them, well, that's all very well, but if you want assurance over things, then it can't be on a best endeavours basis. It has to
Yeah.
actually be accurate.
Yeah.
So, we're now seeing this big scramble of large corporates sort of like, oh God, I've got to try and quantify this data. So we're really trying to help small businesses get on the front foot and be able to continue participating in those opportunities that we know are incredibly important for small business customers, because, they might be less than 0.1% of our supply chain, but we might be 50% of their revenue
Yeah.
as a corporate. So we really need to make sure that that in trying to do our job well, we're not locking small businesses out of business
Yeah.
opportunities that are critical to their survival.
Yeah.
All businesses were a small business once.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you raised so many really interesting points. We may have to extend this out 4 or 5 hours to cover them all, or maybe we'll just have to come back another time. But it really interesting. What I'd like to get your perspective, because you're in the middle of, not many people are right in the middle of two parts of this ecosystem at once. You're in a fairly large organization. It's Xero is certainly big enough. How many people in Xero now?
About 4,500, and we're in the
Yeah.
top, the 30 biggest companies on the ASX. So
Yeah, wow. Okay, so very big. And then you deal with very small companies, and that interplay is really interesting. And some of the things you talk about in terms of does this affect me, I think is really interesting. It's the same thing when people say, "Oh, well, I don't think climate change is going to impact me," and I'm like, "What? Do you live on this planet? Then you probably will be impacted by it." But
that's right.
can can you give me a sense of you mentioned in terms of me being more progressive, so my Xero account might be kind of different. Can you give me a sense of I'm trying to work out where we're at. So you within Xero, do you still have to fight battles and say sustainability is important and talk about why risk and long term? Are people saying, it's all marketing, Tam? Like, what are you talking about? Like, it's all a nice to have. It's be pragmatic. Or because I can imagine a lot of, as you said, a lot of small and medium businesses, they work in 60 hours, they're just squeaking by, and then some Mick rings them up and says, "Hey, you should spend money and time to be better for the environment." Where are we at mentally and culturally in that journey, do you think?
I think, my overarching message is to people that it has to make business sense in order for people to do it. People won't just do it out of the goodness of their heart, because if they do and it doesn't make commercial sense to do it, they'll end up going broke.
Right.
So, there's a great saying, which is something like um, a for-purpose business that makes a profit is a great business,
Mm.
and a for-purpose business that doesn't make a profit is a short-lived business.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. I think that's really true. I think it's important. There's a lot of people in my line of work who are constantly frustrated that the world hasn't done. I just recently graduated from my master's in sustainability. Is like, why doesn't everyone spend 4 years studying this and years working on it and understand that it's really important? But I think it's our job as sustainability solution providers to be able to translate that into economic value.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, I feel so strongly about this, and I'm writing a book about it at the moment.
Fantastic. Yeah.
About the fact that, whether it's sustainability or whether it's another cause that you feel really strongly about, if you want to get things done in a large organization that
Yeah.
operates on commercial principles, you have to learn to speak the language of the organization and learn to
Yeah.
translate what you want to do as a value proposition into something that resonates with the business.
Yeah.
And I think, we've probably won over all the people who are going to be won over by the science and the moral argument. So,
Yeah. Good
you know,
point.
and we're not going far enough, and we're not going fast enough. So
Yeah.
I fall into the category of people who think that pragmatic incrementalism is the
Yeah.
way to go.
Yeah.
Because if you try and upend the whole thing and say,
Sure.
let's just start again from scratch, you lose too many people, because there's too many
Agree.
people who have too much vested in, and
Agree.
and we see that for the vast majority of people, when it comes to the personal, we're like, well, yeah, I know it's important, but that's not convenient for me, or that's not how
Yeah.
my life works, or,
Yeah.
I'm not prepared to make that sacrifice because I'm just trying to earn a living. And, so is every business.
Yeah.
So to sort of come back to your question about, where are we at internally as a company? Believe it or not, I sit in the marketing team. And people sometimes say to me, oh God, how do you get anything done? And I'm like, well, we own all the communications channels. So it's
Right.
very easy to get the message out when we've got something to say. And ultimately, I think what matters is that you have buy-in from your senior executives and your board. It doesn't matter as much who you report to. There's an endless kind of navel-gazing debate that goes on in the what I call the sustainer bubble, where
Yeah.
sustainability people talk to other sustainability people
Yeah,
about
yeah.
what is the optimal place for a team to sit. I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, have that as an existential conversation, but actually
Yeah.
what I'm interested in doing is getting stuff done. And if I can get stuff done from where I sit now, then that's, all that matters to me.
Great.
And I think I've framed that conversation internally at Xero around
Yeah.
things that matter to our business.
Yeah.
We're a software as a service business. Our biggest asset is our people. We can only deliver on the strategy that we have if we have good people who want to work for us, who want to stay for us, and who are engaged.
Yeah.
We survey our people. They tell us that it's important to them. And so my
Mm.
pitch when our CEO started 3 years ago to her was, this is actually a talent attraction and retention issue.
Yeah.
So we should invest in this, because if we want to have the talent that we need to execute the strategy, then we've got to be doing this. Otherwise, they're not going to work for us. They're going to work for our competitors who have better values alignment. So that is a
Yeah.
commercial argument. It's not ROI in the pure sense of, invest this much and you'll get this much back, but it's,
Sure.
we should do this because it makes sense for the business.
Yeah.
Uh, because the other issue you have if you don't have that commercial hook is that as soon as whoever it is who's in charge changes, you
That's right.
lose the work,
Yeah. Yeah.
because
Exactly.
they just believed in it, but it doesn't make sense for the business.
Yeah. It's such an interesting point around so any kind of solution. I think purely on on the environmental basis is definitely not enough. But I think it's a really good point that the economic value is a much more complicated equation most of the time. It typically involves cost, risk, talent, whether there's a talent gap or whether there's a talent loss. We spoke to an organization that like we are losing people under 35 because we are effectively greenwashing on climate, and it's like we need to. Like they're saying, you're just not good enough, and they're like, "Oh my, what do you mean? Like we're trying, you're not trying." So, I think it's a close enough economic value, right? Is like if you don't invest $1 million in this, you might lose $5 million of talent,
That's
and
right.
as you said, talent. So I think that the pressures around companies to start deploying solutions, they're obviously not going to spend way too much and take too much risk, but investor pressure, consumer pressure, employee pressure, regulation pressure, all those things I think are enough now for them to say the rationale not to invest in climate positive technologies and sustainable solutions is too risky. So I need to do something and I need to start. So people, it sounds like you've started a while back because I think you're not a 100-year-old organization, so there's some freshness about it.
Mm,
I would also say, on the whole, I see companies from New Zealand having their values a much more equal to nature attitude across a number of things. So that I'm guessing there are some influences on that. But it might be a complicated equation, but it needs to be a value equation, and that takes some work.
that's right. And I think it also takes uh, changing the lens that you look at things through. I often say to my team, I don't care why people do the right thing as long as they do it.
Yeah,
So let's leave the heavy arguments behind.
yeah,
And I wrote a piece for my Substack last week about how someone tried to pitch an argument to me, to an external person, to invest in something in a carbon accounting space, who said, look, if you're part of a bullshit industry, then you've got a moral obligation to fix that industry.
yeah,
And I was just sitting there thinking, it is no wonder you're not getting funding for this.
yeah,
Because if that's the pitch you're making, how do I take that to the CFO?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like, how
yeah,
do I take that to the people who are making the decisions?
yeah,
There's got to be some, hook, some interest in that we get out of that kind of
yeah,
investment, because people don't. I mean, businesses don't do things sort of out of the goodness of their hearts. I mean,
yeah.
yes, we want it to be aligned to our values,
Yeah.
but it also needs to be commercially justifiable.
Yeah. Is there someday I think makes perfect sense, and it's great to see that as a Aussie Tasmanian based company progressing. Is there another solution you can talk about where you're either in the process and it's going through the motions of from an idea and a concept to being fully deployed, or it has been deployed, that can give us some insights into like what's that journey like? Does it start with a marketing sustainability team and go to CFO first because you want to get that economic value? Does it talk? Do you engage with a lot of stakeholders? I'd love to learn more about that process.
Yeah, look, I mean, it depends on the size of the investment. So, in terms of tech solutions, another partnership that we have is with the Sustainable Choice Group, a Melbourne-based tech company that runs Sustainability Tracker and a number of other tech solutions. And, their CEO and I were having a conversation one day, and I said to her, I keep saying to small businesses, what you need to do is just get started. Just find out where your biggest impact is and get started. Don't try
Yeah,
and, solve the moon. And the challenge she put to me was, well, how do they know where to get started?
yeah,
And I said to her, well, in a large organization, we do a materiality assessment, but no small business is going to do that.
yeah,
What would be great if there was some kind of diagnostic tool that we could share with small businesses. And she was
yeah,
like, okay, I'll build it.
yeah.
So we launched our Small Business Sustainability Hub earlier this year in about October. And that's a kind of resource hub for small businesses who can go and learn about different ways to take action
Okay.
on the things that are material for their business. But the first thing we get them to do is to take this quiz that takes 2 minutes, and they
Yeah,
answer some questions about their business, and they find out what are the most material things for them to be focused on. Because it's obviously going to depend on your business. If
yeah,
you're, and I use this example a lot, so people who've heard me talk about it before will be bored, but if you're a cafe, then probably your biggest impact area is going to be in the produce you buy and what you do with your waste.
yeah.
And worrying about whether you have solar panels on your leased property is probably
Sure.
not your biggest impact area.
Yeah,
Whereas if you're a consultant that is like in graphic design and you work from home and your core impact is in sort of software and energy use, then it probably does make sense to look at that. And
yeah,
again, if you're a hairdresser and you're disposing of chemical waste, then that's probably what you should be focused on. So that
sure.
we worked with Sustainable Choice Group and with a fantastic consultant called Sarah Redmond Neal, who runs a business called Small Mighty CSR that
Yeah,
really focuses on small actionable things for small business
yeah,
to design this. And we've had fantastic feedback from small businesses who've jumped on and used it and said, "Oh, this is what we needed. We needed we need a roadmap to kind of navigate where do I start and what should I be
yeah,
focused on." So that was a relatively I won't say it was a small investment because it wasn't, but it was an investment that fell within my kind of delegated financial authority and my
yeah,
budget. So I could just say, there's a business case here. I've got budget
yeah,
to do it. Let's mobilize the people who need to be mobilized and let's build it. And
yeah,
so we did. But on some other solutions where we're talking about really substantial amounts of money, for example, the partnership that we signed with Qantas to fund the development of the sustainable aviation fuel industry in Australia,
yeah,
because we are a global business. Our
yeah,
people need to travel.
yeah,
Uh, when you're on an island like Australia, there's no other way other than getting on a plane.
yeah,
And so, we looked at that and I said to the CEO, look, if you don't want people to stop traveling, then the only way that we can reduce our carbon emissions associated with travel is actually to invest quite a lot of money in sustainable
mm,
aviation fuel through the mechanisms that allow us to abate our emissions
yeah,
through that. So if you want travel to continue to go up, it's going to cost us a lot of money. And she was like, well, there's really no other solution, is there?
yeah,
And, where I put it to her and to the CFO and to the board that, our history as a disruptor in the industry, as an innovator, really aligns with investing in that kind of future tech, like SAF production, and that it takes people who are prepared to take the risk to go out and say, we will make a forward purchase agreement that then provides the certainty to get the investment to build the facility that means that the SAF can be produced. So
yeah,
that was a far more complex process that involved multiple teams across the business, including the teams that manage travel, the financial planning and analysis team, budget forecasting. We had to build a model that looked out
mm,
over, what is this going to look like over 10 years? Because once you start doing it, you don't stop.
yeah,
And get the CEO and the CFO on board and then the board.
Yep.
to agree to a commitment like that as part of our decarbonisation strategy. And so that was a really different process because that's a far bigger investment.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting to see I think there's obviously there's no silver mushroom, as I like to say. There's no single solution for climate, let alone an individual company. But that, yeah, the differences there between that small one, it's in my budget, I can do it, I can test it, I can get it out, I got some feedback, I rolled with it, and then sustainable aviation fuel. And I think what is also really interesting is you wouldn't think about that. Like your data centers, obviously, you're not sending video through at high volumes, and you're not doing massive amounts of constant AI every day. So it's not going to, you're not going to have a massive data center issue. But that's obviously something that's something you would automatically associate. But travel based on an international company, and the fact that you care about that travel enough to invest in it, and I'm guessing people have also got the how you can work from home a little bit more, how we can do a couple of video calls a bit more. But I agree, people still want to get together. So taking that responsibility over the long term for something which is totally solvable, but it is big and complex and it's going to take some time, like SAF. And partnering with Qantas, like was that how was that was that um, like was that an easy process? Was that in terms of sustainable solutions? I think partnerships are so critical. So yeah, just curious about that. If you can tell us a little bit about that partnership.
Yeah, so Qantas has a program which is called the SAF Coalition that it allows corporate partners to buy into. We approached them a couple of years ago, and the entry point was way too big for us to consider it. And then they dropped the kind of what you had to the minimum investment. And they came back to us and said, "Would you be interested in having the conversation?" And yes. And it was actually a relatively easy process. They take care of all of the assurance and the certification over the certificates that we purchase.
Yeah,
We did a bit of due diligence and got our assurance provider involved and said, will we be able to claim these as an abatement? Is
yeah,
that legit under the GHG protocol and in line with our science-based targets?
yeah,
So once we've done that work, it's been a great partnership, and they're really good to work with. And the coalition's growing, which is what we want to see. Um, I think those kinds of partnerships are really critical. You mentioned data centers, and actually we do use a lot of data, and we are leaning very heavily into AI, and that is the single question I get asked the most by our people at Xero. What are we doing about that? And
yeah,
again, that's not something we can solve on our own.
yeah,
We are working with the large hyperscalers, is every other SaaS platform, and we're having conversations with Google and AWS and OpenAI about what fidelity of data they can give us so that we can get a baseline and understand what the impact is on our product. And one of the things that we did this year was do a full life cycle assessment of the Xero product. So
yeah,
for your listeners who don't know what that is, that's kind of like an end-to-end assessment of all of the environmental impacts, including water and energy, of someone using the Xero product at home. So if you're or in their office. And that's quite complex for a software product. It's a lot simpler if you've got a physical product. And so we've now got that baseline so that we can understand as we build AI features into the product, what is that doing to the overall footprint
yeah,
and what can we do about it? But yeah, I mean, we have to work with those big providers
yeah,
and encourage them in the direction that they're going in. And I do get a bit frustrated by the discourse around that because I don't think we give them enough credit for what they actually are doing. I
sure.
mean, they are the biggest investors in clean and renewable energy in most markets at the moment.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yep. Yeah, I certainly don't think it's anyone thinks it's separable. Like, I don't think anyone thinks, oh, it's fine. We'll just completely and utterly power it by coal-fired power plants, or there's just not enough. There's nowhere near the capacity. And if you look at the risk of now, let alone 12 months from now, any actuary in your company is going to say you cannot afford to run. You will not be able to afford to run that data center that way for in a few years' time. So based on the scale, I agree. It's a little bit of that comment you said about the bubble. Like there's parts of the bubble which is almost impossible to communicate externally. That complexity of data centers, of the water and energy usage and transmission, etc. But there are parts of it which are the actual reality and the complexity. And I think data centers is a big one. We're way over time again. I think we could chat for hours more, and I'm
I'm
very
sorry,
very
I talk too
excited.
much.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic, and that's really really good content. But I know you've got to get back to solving thousands of problems for tens of thousands of small and medium businesses. A couple of quick fire ones to finish. So companies like Anaxium, Australian companies who are helping provide more low emissions water for data centers. As a scale up, like company like that, what's the right way to engage with corporates like Xero?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think we don't have a huge amount of leverage on our own. What I think is really an interesting model to look at moving forward is that, we need kind of what I like to call coalitions of the willing.
Yeah,
You need them internally, but you also need them externally. Unfortunately, in Australia, that is made more complicated by the ACCC and the fact
yeah,
that they think it's collusion. Um, and there's some work
yeah,
going on in that space. But if I were someone scaling in that space, I would want to get together, the top 10 kind of data center users in
yeah,
Australia, and have a conversation with all of them together,
yeah,
because you can kind of orchestrate a shift when there's a movement behind it.
yeah,
But if I go to AWS and say I want you to run Xero's data center on this, I don't have a lot of leverage. But if I go with Atlassian and Canva and the
yeah.
banks and Telstra and Optus and everyone else is using data and Seek and REA, if we all go and say we would like to see this shift, then that's a really substantial part of their market, and they probably have to listen to it.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Look, it's a big part of what we've been trying to do as an industry is to get people together and build those foundations of strength. So that's really good to know. Um, the next quick one is somebody in sustainability in a big company they've just started in this space and they're trying to get their first solution across the board. We spoke about obviously economic value, but a little bit of advice you have for someone who's perhaps trying to get their first sustainable solution implemented in their company?
Okay, so this is what I'm writing my book about. I think you need to do four things. You need to learn to translate sustainability speak into business speak.
Yep.
You need to connect with the right people in the organization. And so find the people who already agree with you and build from there. Like
Yep.
there's always going to be a few people who think it's a good idea.
Sure.
You might not get the CFO, but you might get someone a few layers down who can then connect you with the next person and the next person and the next person. You need to think about all sustainability process as kind of whole of business projects. So you need to be
Yeah.
good at coordinating.
Yeah.
Um, that's the one of the critical pieces that I think people forget, is that someone actually has to do the work, and you're usually asking other people to do the work on top of their day job with their resources.
True.
So
Yeah.
uh, translate the value for them, connect with the right people, coordinate the work, and then critically, if you want it to be a long-term proposition, catalyze the change so that other people take ownership of it,
Yeah.
so that it lives with the people who need to do the work.
Got it. Wow, that's fantastic. That's definitely worth the book, and I'll pre-buy it now if you've got it available. And the last one, we're heading into the next year. Like, what are you optimistic about over the next 12 months or a year? Like, what are you excited about that's coming up?
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot of great tech coming out. And I think that AI, if we're prepared to give it the space to do the things it does well, is really transformative in our profession. None of us like spending all our day in spreadsheets and crunching numbers and analyzing data. And the power of AI to bring insights and to aggregate data and synthesize, huge amounts of material that are out there, I think just gives us a huge opportunity to transform the kind of profession of corporate sustainability from a kind of doing and executing space to one where we can be more strategic and think, and have more brain space to do the kind of work that I was just sort of outlining, that sort of process management work, particularly in the disclosure space. Like
Yeah.
no one wants to spend all their time producing disclosures and doing
Yeah.
reporting, and that's what we all complain about. So I'm excited, and we're seeing that already with a number of solutions that we've implemented internally. That the amount of time that we're spending on that sort of really kind of drudge work is
Yeah.
reducing, which gives everyone more brain space for being creative and thinking about how do we solve the problem.
Yeah, yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the complexity, the speed, and I think as well the urgency is going to require us to be able to use all of those resources to get it done. So, Tam, thank you so much for sharing today. I really, really appreciate it. Looking forward to your book and looking forward to 2026 as a big year of growth and fantastic to see Xero so committed and doing such great work.
Thanks, Mick. Great to talk to you today.